This special TNT only exists in Bedrock Edition, and here's how to get infinite emeralds with just 2 villagers. And these are 157 of the best Minecraft facts we covered this year, and some new ones too. And hey, for some reason, YouTube tells me that no one's ever subscribed to the channel with their device upside down. So if you want to be the first, rotate your screen and aim for that white button above. It's free, and it helps out a ton. This official Minecraft skin was lost to time, but back when Mojang first put out the original Minecraft trailer, there did exist this different variant of Steve that never got used, where instead of the blue shirt and jeans that we're used to, he was wearing a gray shirt and mossy cobblestone pants, which is definitely a look. But with all the new Minecraft skins that they added into the launcher, I'm still amazed this one's never seen the light of day. Although I guess it did show up in a trailer that was seen by over 100 million people, so that's not exactly underground. If you're trying to hide your stuff, you should put it in a barrel instead of a chest. And the reason for that is because barrels are rendered like regular blocks, they're not going to be visible if someone were to use an X-ray glitch. And this original post proves as much. You can definitely tell that there's something hidden underneath the dirt, whereas the barrel, not as much.
Did you know dyed planks were at some point planned for Minecraft? Back in 2013, Dinnerbone tweeted out this picture of an experiment where he made planks that matched the wall colours. But despite hundreds of people showing their support for this, it was never added.
In the future, we'll be able to stack potions like this, or at least that's the idea behind this combat test snapshot. Since to completely rework how PvP's done in Minecraft, Mojang's working on the idea that we'd be able to stack up the same potion to a stack of 16, which is a big change for inventory management considering that holding 16 potions currently looks like this. Not exactly easy to pack. If you look closely at Alex's old skin file, you notice that within the texture data, there were hidden pixels that added glasses to the character. And the reason for this was actually supposed to be a reference to Minecraft's developer Jeb, since they also have an orange ponytail and glasses of their own. But even when you loaded up the skin, this was never visible. So it's essentially the same way that Jeb signed skins in the past, except with a bit more of a unique flair than just writing out your own name.
With just a cartographer and a librarian villager, you can get infinite emeralds. First, craft glass panes, then sell them to the cartographer. With the emeralds from that sale, you can purchase glass from the librarian, and the cycle repeats, helping you make roughly 4 emeralds in profit per cycle.
This supposed useless feature is actually anything but that, because as Crafter Dark and Weefies point out, if you were to toggle on the touchscreen mode option, then it's possible to put some of your items into the crafting 2x2 grid and have them stay there after you close the inventory. And boom, there you go. Now you've got 4 extra slots to your inventory at no extra cost, making this essentially the cheapest shulker box that you could ask for. And the best part, you don't even have to play Minecraft with a touchscreen to do this. Though I will warn this was patched out in recent updates. But if you're playing on older versions, I don't see why you wouldn't take advantage of this. Here's how to go even faster than Swift Sneak 3. Because as it turns out, if you were to get a regular running start, jump, and then crouch with your Swift Sneak, you'll now be walking at a faster speed than you would be if you just used Swift Sneak outright. Folks, we're talking a difference between 3.2 blocks per second at the base, up to 4.2 blocks per second if you're doing this the right way. So while it might be tough to pull off, you probably want to learn it before you go to your next ancient city. Just as long as you don't mess up and accidentally spawn the warden. With a minecart, a powered rail, and a pressure plate like so, we can follow this user's design to get the smallest 1-second clock, which is pretty cool considering how simple the redstone is to set up. And while it might make plenty of noise as it clicks back and forth, literally doing it every second, it's hard to argue with how concise this is. And following this common suggestion, you could just tuck this into the background and have a great bit of sound design for your next grandfather clock.
Before the end dimension, there was supposed to be this, the sky dimension. In early development of Minecraft, this was supposed to be the heaven counterpart to the nether below. It was even confirmed after the website PC Gamer had reported on it, but eventually it was refurbished into the end dimension instead, since that would be more fitting for the game's final location.
This feature was added to Minecraft, but it was never supposed to be added to Minecraft. Let me explain. Since while working on the Christmas and New Year update for Minecraft, Dinnerbone snuck in the texture for these skis. But the truth was that there was never supposed to be any kind of ski item added to Minecraft. The whole reason it was just added into the files is a red herring for any players that checked. Which I guess does work. I mean, they can't leak the features if the features aren't even in the game. But partner with the Christmas textures for chests and the like, you can see how people got confused.
Mobs used to run away from creepers. Back in Minecraft Beta 1.8, mobs would check for an exploding creeper nearby, and if they found one, they'd try to escape. The only problem was that this meant every mob would check every single tick for an exploding creeper in the area, which made the game run much slower. So this was never actually added to the full release.
If you were to trap a drowned mob with a trident, then by following user Agent X24's design, we can have that trident hit a piece of TNT, ignite it, and then simultaneously convert multiple villagers all at once. And the reason is because Minecraft counts assists the same way that it does kills in the code. So if you're playing on hard mode, that means 100% certainty that all of the villagers that die from the TNT are going to become zombies, which is a lot faster than having to make this whole railroad setup this way.
If you're planting a crop farm in a snowy area, use waterlogged leaves instead of water. These blocks can still hydrate nearby farmland, but they don't freeze into ice like a water source block. The worst you'll get is a bit of snow piled on top, which isn't nearly as bad for your crops. In Bedrock Edition, there used to be a glitch where if you placed a food item onto an armor stand's head slot, a strange version of the mob itself would render instead, allowing for these peculiar chicken and pufferfish variants that you can see here.
As user the PJG shows off on Reddit, if you play the music discs 5, 11, and 13, starting them at 5, 11, and 13 seconds respectively, the three mesh together into a coherent story. And you can hear some of that here. It's definitely creepy, but I'm sure this is a huge help for anyone who wants to do lore theory crafting. And at this point, Minecraft feels a lot more like an indie horror game than just a regular indie game. And I'd rather stick to the cute things like axolotls and sheep. Thanks. Shulkers weren't supposed to be purple. In fact, the original idea was that these mobs could camouflage into any nearby block. So a shulker on purple would look purple, while one on endstone would look like, well, endstone. But Jeb decided this was too difficult to code, so it never made it into the game.
TNT doesn't explode underwater, but if you add sodium to it, you get this special underwater TNT, and this blue variant only exists in the Education Edition. Though to do this in other versions, just place a sand block above TNT, ignite it, it'll explode underwater just the same.
This arrow was never supposed to exist in Minecraft, so how did we get it? Well, by using the give command, you're able to get yourself some custom arrow variants like this one. And there you go, potion variants of arrows that we were never supposed to have can function just the same, even if there's no potion associated with it. And I think this would open up a whole new slew of custom PvP maps that you should try out in the future.
Minecraft's pillagers used to look like this. They were designed like a pirate, wearing an orange torn vest and an eye patch. But this picture is the only existing evidence, since the mob designers decided that proper armor would look better instead.
Here's how to smelt your logs into charcoal without ever needing a furnace. Since if you were to go into a crafting table and put those 3 logs towards a campfire, then once you place down that campfire and break it, you'll be left with anywhere from 2 to 4 pieces of charcoal. And sure, it does take 1 piece of charcoal to get the whole thing rolling, but it's hard to say this isn't a whole lot faster. And once you've done this trick once, you'll have enough charcoal left over to keep doing it again and again.
This might look like a crate, but it's actually a piston. See, in older versions of the game, it was possible to do a glitch called block update suppression. And with this, we could make this weird piston block that has a piston head on all sides. And hey, the same was possible for sticky pistons too.
The Piercing enchantment could be a lot more useful than you think it is, since if you get this on your weapon, then it actually gives you a way to save back on your arrows. Since, as you can notice here, if we shoot a projectile into a wall without the Piercing enchantment, we're not able to pick it back up. But with the Piercing enchantment, then it actually works, giving us an economical enchantment that I'm happy to see.
Have you ever seen a villager wearing a green hood? Well, if you have, you're probably using programmer art. See, the reason this happens is because the texture for the nitwit before 1.14 has the same file name as the Village and Pillage update's base texture, proving that all the villagers, even those with jobs, are nitwits in their own way.
Never buy this from a villager, because even though the Woodland Mansion Explorer map might sound like a useful item to get, it could be a ripoff, since as a result of the world generation, there could be times that you buy this map for the cartographer, but the Explorer map doesn't actually show where the structure does exist, but rather where it would have existed if the generation didn't mess up. And really, it's not that useful to get a map that tells me where a Woodland Mansion would have been when I was really hoping to find where one actually is. I think I'd rather just use my eyes for this.
Here's how you get wool in a desert. Now that sounds ridiculous since you're not going to find any sheep out here, but back in 1.3 it was possible since desert temples generated with wool for the colourful bits. Though when terracotta was added in as hardened clay, those patterns were quickly replaced. And as a matter of fact, if you were to break every piece of terracotta in a naturally spawned desert temple, you'd be left with 55 pieces, 54 of them orange and 1 blue from the centre.
There is no limit to the amount of bats that can hang from a single block, which sounds unimportant, but when you execute it like this, it becomes quickly noticeable, and it can make for a pretty serious prank to surprise your friends down in the caves. Though, since it's impossible to tie bats to a lead, I don't know how you'd get all of them together to do this without a spawn egg. These gears used to be in vanilla Minecraft. See, in the Java Edition in-dev phase, there were these flat gears that could only be broken by letting water into them or exploding it, and if you tried to break them like a normal block, it would just break the block behind them. And maybe that's why this buggy feature never made it into the official game.
You know you can make stairs out of netherite. It's a big flex, but in the April Fool's Infinite Snapshot, there was a special stair block called the swaggiest stairs forever, and to get these they'd only naturally generate in the so-called missing dimension, so don't expect this in vanilla anytime soon.
During development, the Evoker used to look pretty different, and we could see that from when Mojang did this Meet the Evoker article. The mob originally had a hat like so, but even though they removed this before release, it's interesting to note that it resembles the one that you see on the Illusioner mob. Though the Illusioner wasn't added officially either, so maybe Mojang just doesn't like hats.
Here's how an axolotl can be an infinite water source, since in Bedrock Edition, it's possible to capture a fish or axolotl in an empty bucket. So you could use this to get an infinite amount of water for your buckets. Just capture the fish mob, place it down, then recapture it. Rinse, repeat, and there you have it.
What do creepers and leaves have in common? Well, according to Mojang, a lot, apparently. See, Notch said that he pictures creepers as being made of dry, crunchy leaves. And Dinnerbone furthered this by saying that the creepers explode because they rub together like a bunch of sticks and then spontaneously combust. And so I guess that makes MatPat's theory about them correct on this one. Back in Java Edition Classic, when you broke a wood log, it would drop the planks instead of the actual block, which seems more like mine than craft to me. And moving from logs to the nether counterparts, you'll notice that the Crimson and Warp stem blocks are the only logs in the game that have an animation.
You probably know you can power a jukebox with redstone, but how about using a jukebox to power your redstone? Strange as it sounds, if you place a comparator facing out of a jukebox, the block will output a signal strength the same as the ID of the disk. So disk 11, for example, would give a redstone signal of 11, which is about all the disk 11 is good for, let's be honest.
Even though magma cubes are made of, well, magma, they can swim in water just fine. And in fact, they're the only mob that you'll find in the nether that can swim normally.
This cactus is 23 blocks tall, and what's even more impressive is that this cactus spawned naturally. Thanks to the Minecraft at Home research project, the community has discovered seeds you can load up in Java 1.14.4 and see this huge cactus. So if you need a bunch of green dye, I'd say this is a good start.
What makes these baby polar bears special from any other mob in the game? Well, if you listen close to its sound effect, you'll notice that it's not just a sped up version of the regular polar bear's cry, which is how it is for any other baby mob, but instead, the polar bear cub has a unique recording of its own.
Splash bottles of water aren't useless, you're just using them wrong. But if you were to throw one of these water bottles at yourself or a friend who's on fire, it'll actually extinguish them, making this a cheap way for some quick relief in the nether. And more importantly, it means that bottle you accidentally brewed up wasn't a total waste.
If you look closely, you'll notice that the chest that's inside of the chest bow isn't the same chest as the one that's inside of the minecart, but rather the chest texture that shows in the chest bow is 12 by 12 pixels, while the one in the actual block is 14 by 14. But I guess that just goes to show that those 2 extra pixels weren't all that necessary, because I didn't even notice. What do this llama and this boat have in common? Well, if a player rides on top, neither of them will sink, even if you're in water that's deeper than 2 blocks. Which seems small, but the same can't be said for our horses or pigs, so it's definitely noticeable. And that'll make it all the easier to bring your friends along on the caravan for the next time that you travel.
It's possible to enchant a recovery compass, but only for a cruel joke. If you have a Curse of Vanishing book, you can attach it to your recovery compass in an anvil, but obviously this wouldn't do you much good considering that the compass would disappear on death, and then you couldn't use it to find the rest of your stuff anyway, but it might make for a good prank to play on your friends.
It turns out, piglins are the reason that there's no more netherite ore in the game, only the ancient debris that we're left with. At least, that's according to this official Minecraft article for 1.16. In this, it says that pure netherite ore no longer exists, since the piglins mined it all out of the nether. Which begs the question, why would they switch from netherite to gold tools? So clearly they're not that smart.
If you listen closely, this Ravager sound effect might be familiar. And the reason is that if you change the pitch on the Ravager's first and third death sounds, they turn out to be exactly the same as the Pillager's death sound.
The Phantom used to look like a nether mob, but that's the problem. It was never meant to be. So because of this, Mojang switched its red texture to the darker purple colors that we see today. What's the difference between this fence gate and this one that we have right here? Well, it's hard to notice, but when you place a fence gate next to a wall, it'll stoop down a little bit lower to match the height of the cobblestone wall. But what the cobblestone walls lack in size, they more than make up for in volume. And in fact, if you were to craft a stack of cobblestone into cobblestone walls, you'd be left with exactly enough walls to fence off one 16 by 16 chunk.
Crafting a boat out of obsidian sounds safe, but it's actually stupid, since as we see in the April Fool's snapshot called the Love and Hugs update, crafting one of these obsidian boats is only good for you sinking down to the bottom of the ocean. Funny, sure, but definitely not my first choice for sailing. Now, if only these could float on lava.
If you place TNT over a slab and then ignite it, it will have a much smaller blast radius than if you explode it on the ground. In fact, there are cases where only the slab will be destroyed, leaving the rest of the block safe. And I wouldn't worry about this getting patched anytime soon, since it's been open and unresolved on the bug tracker since 2014. 2014.
809 quadrillion. That sounds like a big number, but it's actually how many uniquely crafted banner patterns there are. With 16 blank banners, 38 patterns of 16 colors each, and up to 6 patterns per banner, we can get this giant number. Though that includes a lot of duplicates because these two inverted patterns do look the same, but they count as separate entries and don't stack.
Ever wonder why you can only breed horses with a golden carrot or a golden apple? Well, this actually comes from Greek mythology. See, in the myth, there's this horse named Arion, which was a super steed that only ate precious materials, which would make a lot more sense to do economically if the Minecraft horses weren't so abysmally slow.
You can grow kelp on almost any solid block, and the reason this works is based on real life, since kelp actually absorbs its nutrients directly from the water instead of having roots like a regular plant. Skeletons didn't always use bows. In fact, when they were first added, these skeletons would hold out their arms and attack the player just like a zombie.
According to Notch, torches were supposed to burn out after a while, but this never made it into the official game. However, if you play the Java Edition 2.0 snapshot, they do just that. And you'll even need a flint and steel just to reignite them once they burn out, which is annoying, so let's just hope this stays as an April Fool's joke. Of all the tools in Minecraft, the pickaxe is the only one that doesn't have a right-click function. Since we can use a hoe to till soil, a shovel to create pathland, we can use an axe on our copper blocks, and shears for, well, shearing, the pickaxe is really the odd one out. And I don't think it's gonna get a used feature anytime soon, since frankly, I don't even know what that would be.
A netherite beacon looks expensive, but how much would it cost? Well, all the ancient debris alone would be 5,904 pieces. And all of those items would take up 92¼ stacks and fill up nearly 3.5 shulker boxes. Which makes this one by WotZ even more impressive.
From afar, this might look confusing, but up close, you'll notice that this mess of white lines is actually an iron golem. See, when an iron golem cracks as its health goes down, those cracks show up when it's got the glowing effect, giving you even more of a reminder to toss in an iron ingot to heal it up. This feature showed up in Minecraft Story Mode 2 years before it did in the base game. See, this here is Winslow, the calico cat from the Telltale game. And while they seem like a minor character, this was actually the inspiration for when the calico cats got added into Minecraft in Java 1.14. Except then, their patterns were flipped.
What was the first item in Minecraft? While something like the apple has a texture dating back to before the game's release, it was actually the item arrows that was first added to the Java Edition survival test. And you could fire these by pressing the tab button. And for a bonus fact, skeletons could even fire a special purple arrow.
Back in the beta, Minecraft's Endermen used to look like this. They had green eyes instead of purple ones, and they emitted a kind of black smoke. Oh, and they also had the same sound effects that the zombie did, which is confusing to hear nowadays. But luckily, they weren't very strong back then, so it wasn't that big of a threat if you heard either one.
Silverfish used to have as much health as the player, with 20 hit points to their name. And thankfully, after the beta 1.9 pre-release, this was fixed so they now only have 8 HP instead.
If you get a mob to stand on top of a cake, it'll just keep rotating in place, completely unable to move. And this is due to a pathfinding oversight in their AI code, which is why the same thing happens on fences as well.
Drowned in Bedrock Edition looks significantly different to those in Java. But why is that? You'll notice the drowned mob in Bedrock has a 3D outer layer to its model, which gives it a bigger head and arms than it has in Java. Additionally, this causes its armor to render weirdly, especially with any helmets like so.
If you were to fish up an item with a fishing rod, it normally flies up to you. But it turns out that if you step to the side, the item's still flying, and in fact it'll just completely pass you by. Which I guess makes sense, but it's still a funny sight to see from this angle. And at this point, would it be fly fishing or fish flying? I have no clue.
You can never outrun this slime, and the reason is that a slime's size determines its movement speed. So a size 8 slime will always outpace a player if you're not using any potion effects.
Baby chickens are really small, but they aren't coded like they are. See, even though these mobs are less than a half a block in size, they still won't walk through half-block tall spaces, meaning you don't have to worry about any of these mobs escaping through this slab, even if it doesn't make much sense.
When they were first added, Minecraft saplings used to look like this. They were only 2 colors, just tan and green, but only 6 days later they were given a new texture that looks a lot more like how they look today.
When they were first added in, shears were originally supposed to be used to diffuse TNT, but it didn't make it into the final version, which I think is a shame. It would have been fun to carry around a pair of shears the next time they are doing TNT combat, but I guess a water bucket could do the job just as well, and for only 1 extra iron ingot. Back in the survival test for Java Edition, when you would mine gold ore, it would drop 1 to 3 golden blocks instead of golden ingots of the ore itself. And if only it still worked that way, huh? But here's the real question for you. Which came first, gold or diamond? Well, not only did gold come first, but the diamond block's texture is just the same as the block of gold. gold, but with a bluish tint. And that's true with the old programmer art and the new textures that came with 1.14's texture update.
What's the difference between a Hoglin in 2020 and one today? Well, back in the snapshots for the Nether update, the Hoglins had a glitch in their code in such a way that their legs and ears would flail about when moved or attacked.
If you take a close look at any of the Minecraft doors, you'll notice that they have two sets of hinges on the opposite sides, instead of just one functional hinge. And while that might seem like a bug or mistake, Mojang did confirm on the bug tracker that this is actually intentional. And if you look at the comments, it seems like some players aren't too happy about that. Sorry, Connor, I don't think they're gonna fix it.
You've likely heard the cat music disc, but did you know there's a secret dog music disc as well? If not, I don't blame you, it's hard to find. Exclusively on the Legacy Console Edition, there was an extra dog track that played at the end of the cat music disc, meaning the cat music disc in that version was the longest disc in the game.
Lecterns were added in 1.14, but Dinnerbone wanted them in the game much sooner. In fact, back in 2012, Dinnerbone talked about a way to add in a stand that would make it easier to read the written books. But after various complications, the idea was scrapped, and it wouldn't return until 2019, 7 years later. This is the most deadly pufferfish in Minecraft, and the reason for that is because if you change the NBT tag for a pufferfish's puff state data value, you can change its damage and poison time. So if we use this data command like so, we can make one that's either completely harmless or a destroyer of worlds.
If you were to place a sign while on a ladder, then you'll have frozen time, and now you'll remain mid-air on that ladder without having to hold the sneak key. But worth mentioning that this only works on single player, since on a multiplayer server you can't pause the game this way. Did you know that there's an axolotl even rarer than the blue variant? See, back in the development of Snapshot 21W17A, there was the idea to add an axolotl with an open mouth texture like this, but it was never properly implemented, and by the following snapshot it was removed. So if you see an axolotl with an open mouth, you've either got a glitch, or maybe it's just hungry. But even if it was starving, why does the axolotl eat this fish but not this one? Well, the answer is actually based on real life. According to Mojang's dev diaries, this is because real axolotls will only eat fish that are alive. So that's why they'll only follow you into battle if you have the bucket. They just want their sushi as raw as it comes.
Why do striders drop string? Well, the reason's piglins. See, to explain how these pigs get the string for their crossbows, Mojang developed the strider with this in mind. And I guess logically they get the item made from these bristles on the side, but they must have a lot over after killing them, since they still barter away their string anyway.
Usually, when you craft something out of wood, it'll look like it's made of oak, but there are exceptions to that, like how item frames and fletching tables look like they're made of birch. Barrels look closest to spruce, cartography tables and grindstones have a dark oak base, and things like chests and jukeboxes don't look like any wooden plank. But sadly, acacia is left out. Here's how to get a pet trident. If you have a loyalty enchanted trident and you throw it, it'll follow you until it goes into your inventory. But if you fill your inventory after throwing it, it can't return, so it just hovers around the player like this. You can even do this with multiple tridents, creating quite the hectic sight.
Zombie piglins used to look like this. Back when they were first announced, they'd exposed red flesh in their texture and they didn't hold any kind of weapon, which made them look a lot more like zombies than we're used to. But that version of the pigmen never made it into the game, and they were changed to a green color before its release. Zombie pigmen weren't the only nether mob that got a makeover though. During development, blazes originally had no eyes, and they just float around without any expression. But according to Jeb, this made it look more like a yellow rock than a mob, so the eyes were added in to give it more personality.
Before we even got concrete confirmed for the snapshots, Jeb first showed off the concept in a video posted in February 2017. And in this clip we see an early texture for the pink concrete powder, and how it would eventually harden on impact with water.
If you watch closely, this squid's arms will start to move slower and slower. And why this happens is because, in Bedrock only, a squid's arms show how much oxygen it has left. So when 15 seconds pass and it's out of air in the tank, its arms will stop and it'll suffocate, which seems like a lot of effort to code for such a pointless mob.
Mushrooms are a ripoff, or they were back in beta. See, back in the pre-release, if you right-clicked a mushroom with a stack of bowls, there was a bug that they'd all condensed down into only one bowl of mushroom stew. And if this wasn't changed, I'm not sure many of us would try to find these in a mushroom fields biome.
In the Snapshot 12W32A, we got a new block called Work in Progress. A catchy name, I know. But even unfinished, I'm sure any Minecraft veteran can notice that this eventually became what we call the beacon block. Though to get there, it had to go through 4 separate texture variations, which definitely lives up to the Work in Progress name after all. Alright, pop quiz. Which one of these is coal and which one is charcoal? Well, when it was first added in, it was nearly impossible to tell the difference, considering that charcoal had the same texture as coal. And it wasn't until a few updates later that charcoal would get its own texture like this. But really, they both burn for the same amount of time and they have the same use, so there wasn't much of a drawback for getting them confused. Although I guess it would have been confusing to try and stack both of these together in a chest.
You can only ride in a boat with a skeleton horse in Bedrock, which sounds ridiculous, but what's even more stupid is the steps it takes to pull this off. To do this, you need to get a skeleton horse in a boat and then swim underneath it and right-click the boat to get in and pilot about it, because if you don't, you'll just ride the horse and can't move anywhere.
This wolf might be angry, but it'll never hurt me. And the reason is that when in peaceful mode, wolves cannot get aggressive. And in fact, the only mob capable of hurting you in peaceful mode is a llama that spits on you. Nothing else works. Now, why is this quartz block better than this one? Well, by default, quartz blocks have a low blast resistance. But if you were to use 2 quartz slabs or a smooth quartz block instead, you can make a substantially stronger fort than the alternative, all without sacrificing the look of the regular quartz. This fact will save you a lot of experience, because while we normally rename our items one at a time, it turns out that if you put a stack of 64 name tags into an anvil, then for the low cost of 1 experience level, you can surely rename all of them, which is my favorite way of getting a bunch of name tags changed into dinner bones so that I can have those to keep my mobs around.
This isn't leather armor, but actually it's called studded armor. This unused armor set only exists within the data for the items.png image in the game's files, and these specific sprites were ripped directly from Notch's old game, Legend of the Chambered 2, but they were removed before armor was ever implemented, making it just an Easter egg.
Back in the day, it was possible to breed mushrooms and cows together, but ever since Snapshot 12W7A, this has been changed so that they only breed amongst themselves, which seems a little unfair, but since you can't shear a mushroom to change it back to a cow, I guess there's still a workaround if you need it. Bamboo grows fast, too fast in some cases, and as it is, it'll only take 500 bamboo stalks in an automatic farm like so to produce more items than a hopper can actually process, meaning that this simple farm produces more than 2.5 items per second.
This is not a light grey shulker box. At least it wasn't in Snapshot 16W39B, but rather in this experimental build, it was referred to as a silver shulker box instead. And understandably, it was changed just the day after to match the standard names of the dye. And while we're talking about light grey, I'd like you to take a look at this stained glass pane. Can't see it? Well, that's actually the point. Since the texture is flat and the inventory screen is light grey, it's almost impossible to see a single light grey stained glass pane like this. And according to Mojang, that's intentional.
Did you know pigs could drop brown mushrooms? Sure enough, back in the Java Edition survival test, there was a time where these mobs only dropped brown mushrooms on death. But obviously, this was changed to a pork chop when that item got added in. Though it makes me wonder, if you eat a mushroom stew made out of pig shrooms, is that still vegetarian? I don't know.
Look closely, you might be able to spot the difference in these textures. And no, it's not just that one has a fish and the other doesn't, but actually the bucket texture in this sprite is 1 pixel lower than the original. And this is supposedly intentional, since the artist Japper claims it's due to the weight of the fish.
Stop using bone meal. Instead, you gotta use super fertilizer. Strange as it may seem, this is actually an item that Mojang's added to Minecraft. And to even get this, we'll need to mix together ammonia and phosphorus in a lab table. But from that point, this behaves a lot like old bone meal used to, where we can grow our plants and trees right up to maturity just like that. But it's a lot harder to farm than regular bone meal, so that's gotta be the drawback.
This fox is too small for its own good, and that becomes immediately apparent when you put it in water. Sure, it's cute, but it's so small that even when it's swimming, it'll start drowning. And you can notice this when a baby fox tries to hunt a fish. It'll likely die before it gets to the food.
It's physically possible to explode a block of obsidian. Now, obviously, you couldn't do this with regular TNT, no matter how many explode at once, but if you use this command to summon a prime piece of TNT with an explosion power of 72 or above, it'll be strong enough to destroy a piece of obsidian.
If Minecraft clocks are too expensive, here's how to get one without crafting it. In Java Edition, after unlocking the recipe, all you need to do is check the recipe book to see the clock sprite. And there you go, it works just the same, and this one didn't cost 4 gold and some redstone.
You know how a chicken can keep running with its head cut off? Well, the same does happen in Minecraft. Kind of. See, if you were to kill a chicken where it falls off a cliff, its corpse will fall slower than any other. And additionally, it'll still flap its wings after dying.
When they were first shown off, piglins would raise their arms like this to attack you when angry, making them look a lot more like zombie pigmen than the piglins we're used to. However, this seems to have been removed before any Nether update snapshots came out. Why is this pattern called Thing? Well, it's not just Mojang being humble, there's actually a good reason for it. If you were to translate the word Mojang from Swedish, it would roughly translate to the words gadget, doohickey, or thing.
Did you know Steve can sprint twice as fast as a full-speed minecart? Sure enough, if you were to sprint jump on a blue ice tunnel filled with trapdoors like so, it's possible that the player can move at a top speed of 18.5 blocks per second. And if you were to build this in the Nether, we can consider it 8 times faster than the overworld. But doing that will cause your hunger bar to drop just as quickly, so bring plenty of steak for the journey.
This is the deadliest elytra in Minecraft, and not because of the elytra itself, but rather the firework rockets we use. Since if you add firework stars to these rockets when crafting, you can still use them for flight, but you'll take damage as well, proving Icarus wasn't the only one to fly too close to the sun. So if you rightfully don't want to fly with these rockets, there is another way to reach liftoff.
Which sounds crazy, but if you hit yourself with a slow-falling potion arrow like this, and then launch up with a Riptide Trident, then that potion effect's gonna keep you at a 45-degree angle long enough to reach the stars. And then after 11 seconds when the arrow's potion effect wears off, you'll be able to launch launch off with your elytra and have a pretty decent takeoff while you're at it. Which is good, because otherwise I can't think of another reason to shoot yourself with an arrow like this. The reason that beds explode in the Nether is because Notch was lazy. Well, that's an oversimplification, but he has gone on record saying that this is the easiest solution to whether or not the player should respawn in the other dimensions. And it's funny to think that just with that little decision, it made for an entirely new form of combat in the way of bed bombing. Of all the items in Minecraft, there's only one that has the word blocks in its name that isn't an actual block. And of course, that would be the music disc for the track, well, Blocks. But that's also why it sticks out like a sore thumb when you type in the word block into the creative menu. Obviously, one of these is not like the others.
Don't feed your parrot a cookie, which is a lesson even Mojang had to learn, since when the parrot was first added to the game, you could use cookies to tame them. However, cookies are actually toxic to parrots in real life, so the code was changed to give them a fatal poison effect instead, reflecting the real world fact.
Under certain circumstances, an iron golem will attack a villager. Now, clearly the villagers are a peaceful mob, but if they use their fireworks after a raid, that celebration might just damage a nearby golem. And if it does, the iron golem will get aggressive and even kill the villager that it's supposed to protect.
Why is this villager riding a chicken? Well, if the baby zombie on a chicken jockey happens to be a zombie villager, then when you cure it, it'll become a villager again, but won't leave the chickens back. Meaning if you cure this Diamond Armor zombie villager chicken jockey, you'll have the true rarest mob in Minecraft. But unfortunately, we can't take that ultra rare chicken jockey to the Nether, since neither chicken jockeys nor spider jockeys are able to go through portals.
If you were to tweak the game so that a panda eats the spyglass item, then since this obviously wasn't intended, when it takes a bite out of the spyglass, it creates the missing texture particles, which would explain these purple and black icons that you see here. And really, I don't blame Mojang for never coding in eating particles for the spyglass. According to the official Minecraft Combat Handbook, you can make an infinite lava source if you were to make a cross shape of nether bricks and then add lava to the middle. Okay, but that's obviously fake. Man, even Dinnerbone confirmed that it was false. But even though this did come out in 2014, we would eventually get renewable lava when we got the dripstones and the caves and cliffs update. So the concept's true, but this is just a blatant lie. What's more deadly, a wither rose or a magma block? Well, while a wither rose might seem scarier, as you can see from this comparison, they actually both deal the same amount of damage at the same time. But if you hold down the sneak key, you can avoid taking any damage from the magma block, which I'd argue makes the wither rose at least a little bit more deadly.
Minecraft ghasts look like ghosts, but they're actually cats. At least according to C418, one of the game's composers. In a Reddit AMA, they confirmed that the sounds for the ghast came from their pet cat, who made the noises when it'd get disturbed while sleeping.
I would bet that most of you have never experienced this Minecraft fact, because frankly, I hadn't either. But if you were to press a button next to a bell, there is a chance for the bell to play its ringing sound in reverse, much like this.
At some point, it was possible for Endermen to move around and place cactus blocks, meaning it was theoretically possible for enough Endermen to increase the population of cacti in a desert and keep planting more as they grow, which is just as terrifying as it sounds, trust me. Maybe they made the really tall cactus from earlier.
When Minecraft first added in its music discs, there were two songs that were added to the game, those being 13 and Cat. And for my money, one of those is a lot more enjoyable to listen to than the other, but I think it's interesting that they added in something as avant-garde as 13 this early. But I'm sure that all the theorists are happy that they've been able to look into the lore for this long. This might look like a magic wand, but it's actually a sparkler. And the way that we get this is by mixing together chloride and magnesium with a stick in the Education Edition. And actually using different kinds of chloride could give you different colors, such as calcium chloride for an orange one, or tungsten chloride for a green one. And unfortunately, while these give off particles, they don't actually give off any light, meaning these are really more of a party trick than anything useful.
This is how we see the end, and this is how an Enderman sees the end. If you go into spectator mode and choose an Enderman like so, it applies a filter to invert all the colours we see, meaning they see the end as an island of blue stone on a sea of white, with them and the Ender Dragon also having green eyes. Oh, and to them, cobblestone looks like endstone does to us.
This fishing rod could be a deadly weapon, since back in old forms of PvP, before the combat update in 1.9, it was possible to use a fishing rod's bobber to stun your enemy and then hit them with a couple of combos with your sword. And that'd be why if you're on a legacy PvP server, you'd see these fishing rods going around. Did you know that Minecraft pigs can fly? Though not like this, but rather like this. See, if one player sits on a saddled pig like so, and then the other one grabs hold of a lead, they can launch off with an elytra and keep both the pig and your friend in tow. But if you do this, just make sure to land in some water, otherwise that pig isn't gonna make a round trip. If you use the /item replace command to get a bone in the head slot, then once you wear a bone as a helmet, it's coded in as an Easter egg that it'll appear in the player's mouth, making Steve look more like a dog with a bone in its mouth. And really, there's so many Easter eggs that are coded in for the item replace command, it's worth trying out to see which ones are your favorite.
This is is what the spider looked like back in Java Edition Classic. It had a brown texture with black beads for eyes, which is quite the difference from how it looks today. Plus, it gave them some natural camouflage for dirt blocks, so that would have made these even creepier to deal with.
In case you didn't know, leaves in Bedrock Edition turn white when you leave them in the snow. But if you play that version and you never noticed, that might not be your fault, since it's not an instant transition. And instead, it'll take some time in the tundra before it finally changes their tone.
This mob will not die, because it's possible for mobs to hold a totem of undying and still be resurrected upon death. Even the sound effect plays, but the animation does not appear. Though if you give a totem to a fox to hold, it'll at least have some particles to show for it.
When you give a mob the no AI tag, it doesn't move or follow the player. And that's true for all of them, except the Guardian. Yeah, apparently, since the Guardian's eye is coded as the head on the model, it'll still follow the player, even when it's supposed to have no AI. Turtle eggs are stronger than you think, because even though these eggs can't support the weight of the player or other mobs, they can support lanterns that are either placed above or below them. But it's worth noting that the lantern does look like it's floating in those cases, so maybe that's why they don't break. It was never there in the first place. This exclusive item is only found in Education Edition, since when you use the camera item or entity, you're able to get yourself the exclusive photo item, which is handy since that game doesn't have a screenshot function, and you can even put the item inside of an item frame, which I think looks great. Definitely a lot better than some custom map art.
How many items does it take for an iron pressure plate to give a full redstone signal of 15? Well, if we throw all the items on there, in total it would take 9 stacks and 22 items minimum, or just shy of 600 items. Or, you know, use a redstone torch.
Why do Piglin Brutes have 50 HP compared to the regular Piglin's 16? Well, according to the lead artist Jasper, that's because their golden arm guard serves as protection, which is the first ever case of golden armor actually being effective.
Be careful wearing an elytra on a ladder, because it's actually possible to start gliding while climbing a ladder. All you have to do is press sneak and then jump. At that point, you can start falling down the ladder, and if you look down too much, you'll even fall fast enough to take fatal fall damage. But really, if you have an elytra, why are you even using a ladder anyway?
Alright, pop quiz. What mob is this? I'll give you a hint, it's not a silverfish, but actually, it's just an endermite. See, when the endermite was added in, it was just a purple version of the silverfish, before it eventually got this new smaller model that we see today.
If you look closely, you'll notice that bedrock and stone look very similar. And the reason is that in all versions, the bedrock texture is just a very high contrast version of the stone texture. And this is true whether using the current textures or the old programmer art textures. But hey, the same is basically true for endstone and cobblestone, so it's fair.
In vanilla Minecraft, it's entirely possible to have a candle that's lit on fire, even when it's underwater. And with the NBT tags like so, we can summon in that candle. Or if you're in Java, just use a debug stick like so. If you compare the loading animation for a crossbow when you're in first person in Bedrock and in Java, you notice that the difference is that the Bedrock plays more to the side while the Java happens in the middle.
If you were to try to use your diamond pick to mine a block of obsidian underwater while not standing on solid ground, it would take you just shy of 4 minutes, at 234 seconds. And for that effort, just place a door and do it in 9.4 seconds.
This is the most detailed texture that Mojang's ever added to Minecraft, or that they kind of added. See, in the Infinite Snapshot for the April Fool's edition, there was a joke feature called a very fine item, and this item had a very fine texture of 64 by 64 pixels, which is a lot more than the 16 by 16 that we're used to. And while it's definitely not a realistic Minecraft texture like we're used to, at least the text is readable. That's gotta be something. What's the most fuel you can put in a furnace? Well, even though a lava bucket is the single best item, if you put in a full stack of coal blocks, it can smelt for over 14 hours straight, which is just over 42 full Minecraft days of smelting. That's more than 50 times better than a single lava bucket. But you would need 576 coal to do this, so better get fortune on your pickaxe. Do you remember when Minecraft was gonna add a monkey? Or how about an alligator? Well, if you don't, it's probably because you don't live in China. See, with the release of the Chinese version of Minecraft, Mojang held a special mob vote just for that region. And as we know, the panda won in a landslide, and it now exists in the global release. In Bedrock Edition only, if you were shot by a tipped arrow that you blocked with a shield, while that would deflect the direct damage that you get from the arrow, you would still get the potion effect from the tipped arrow, which is a bit confusing. But if you think about it, we made these arrows using lingering potions. Maybe some of that lingering effect still exists. And that big why if you blocked it, you're still gonna get that potion effect. Sorry. This is the worst piece of armor that's ever been added to Minecraft. But that's because it was a joke. See, in the so-called trendy update for Minecraft's April Fools, there was this item that was called the ankle monitor. And then if you put it on, it functioned much like the Curse of Binding. You'd never be able to take it off. And it also applied the slowness effect, making it a lot worse than those Curse of Binding boots you found anyway. Oh, and not to mention a bunch of annoying messages happening in your chat.
This light block is the only high definition texture in Minecraft. At least it was. Before the texture changed in Snapshot 21W18A, the Java Edition light blocks had a 32 by 32 texture, instead of the 16 by 16 that we're used to.
This isn't a magic potion, but you might think it was. Because when Bedrock Edition first added in honey bottles to the game, they had an exclusive texture that was different from the Java edition, but in the beta phases of the game, it was changed to actually match the same texture, which is unfortunate. I actually like how this looks a lot, but I guess it makes sense that the whole glass bottle wouldn't get changed to a yellow texture, so it was eventually changed for parity. This here is called Invisible Bedrock, and if you can't see what I'm talking about, that's kind of the point. Now, this behaves much like the barrier block, except it's exclusive to the Bedrock edition of Minecraft, and it was originally used in the game to create these world boundaries around old worlds. But those world boundaries didn't go past build height, so if you just built up high enough, you could walk over it. Here's how to completely ruin a book and quill, because if you were to take the item inside of an anvil and then give it a new name before you write anything inside, then from that point, you can't write anything inside the book. So if you want to rename your manifesto, you should instead wait until after you've written something inside of it and then rename it that way. Then it'll still function normally. Let me introduce you to the wonderful world of Ice Bomb Parkour, because in the Minecraft Education Edition, it's possible to create this secret item called an ice bomb, which is a projectile similar to an egg, but if you throw it at water, you're able to use it for parkour as well, which is a really fun feature. It's a shame that it's only stuck to this education lab. Minecraft veterans remember a time where we didn't need to use blaze powder to brew up our potions. So why did this change? Well, according to one of the game's developers, Sarge, it's so that the game's progression wouldn't be thrown off, since when they added in igloos, it would have been less important to go to the nether if you could just find a brewing stand right underneath one in the overworld. This item never made it into Minecraft, but if you check back within the game's files for Snapshot 19W34A, there was a texture for the crystallized honey item that was added to the game. But when Snapshot 19W42A came out, that same texture got removed. And apparently this was because, according to one of the Minecraft gameplay developers, it was never actually intended to come out in the game. But it was still fun to get a couple of theories and ideas surrounding them before they were eventually removed anyway. If you're playing in normal difficulty and you sit inactive within a minecart, then no matter how long you sit there, your hunger bar will never deplete, which essentially gives you a way to never starve to death. But it's pretty boring, so I'd rather just go get some food and go about it that way. If you have an Efficiency 5 shovel, you're doing it wrong. Or I should say you're doing overkill, because really, an Efficiency 4 diamond or netherite shovel is already fast enough to instantly mine every shovelable block. So by going above and beyond to try and get yourself an Efficiency 5, it's really pointless. So really, stick to Efficiency 4 and save your extra levels for Silk Touch or something. Every time that you place a coral block in Minecraft, Mojang donated 1 cent to charity. After Bedrock players had placed 10 million coral blocks underwater, Mojang decided to donate $100,000 to the Nature Conservancy project. And while I'm not so sure if they're still offering that, I will say that we'll do the same. So for every new subscriber that we get from this video, we'll donate $1 to the Nature Conservancy, up to 1,000 people. So by just hitting that red button, you can help to protect coral reefs all around the world. And if you're already subscribed, don't unsubscribe and resubscribe. Just use your mom, dad, brother, sister's phone, whatever, and have them subscribe so that we can turn our coral reefs from this into this. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?